Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Just over a week ago I released a Humble Choice 2020 video and my views were a bit harsh and the audio was pretty terrible, so I thought I'd correct these issues with a second video. So without further ado, let's go to the do-over. Overcooked 2 is a manic multiplayer cooking sim and divorce stimulator. I really like this game on the Switch and occasionally play it with my wife when we've been getting on too well and we need a good argument. We should really designate someone as the head chef for each level and follow their orders, but it never really works out that way. On the PC, it doesn't have the same convenience for multiplayer as on the Switch or other consoles, so it's really not for me. It feels like a poor choice to go into a PC monthly bundle, if I'm honest. It's a great game, it's just not really for me on PC. Children of Morta is a story-driven RPG hack and slash with a retro pixel art style. I really like it. It plays well, it looks great, and there's a good 14 hours of content to get through. I feel like this would be more fun on the sofa with, again, Nintendo Switch, but if you like hack and slash RPGs, this could be the one for you. One Step from Eden is a grid-based combat and deck building game. I have to admit I don't get this game at all. I get how I'm meant to play it, and I don't understand how any of it can be considered fun. It's one of several games this month where I'm clearly not the target audience, but it must have an audience. When I first played Beast Inside, I wrote it off as a bad game because of glitchy instructional events and puzzles that got solved almost by accident. On second look, it's still somewhat glitchy, but it's not terrible or unenjoyable. The developers have created a great atmosphere, and when the horror elements which are teased on the intro come into effect, it's a genuinely creepy experience. If you like horror games, then this will be right up your dark alley. That's not a euphemism. Indivisible is the first of the JRPG family of games this month, and it's very much a game of two halves. The first is a competent platformer, which I found myself really enjoying. The second is a distracting and almost turn-based combat system which involves pressing one button to defend yourself and the same button to attack. It's not really for me, but if you're into this kind of combat, then you'll love it.
Not gonna happen.
The next JRPG is a very Sega game. From the music and art style to the armour that not only fails to cover the chest area, but has a dedicated opening for the viewing window. If you played any of the 20 odd games in this series to have come out over the last 30 years, or if you're into JRPGs, or even if you're just a self-described weeb, then you'll love it. I kinda hated it. Yet more JRPGs, and this one feels suspiciously like filler. It's a 19-year-old top-down 2D adventure game that only got translated into English in 2018. Unfortunately, it's still stuck in an 854 by 480 resolution with no upscaling or filtering. It's not terrible and it's got some great anime art style cutscenes, but it does remind me very much of PC games that were popular in the very early 90s, so it's dated even for the time period when it was actually released. The sequel, on the other hand, which was released in English a year earlier than its predecessor, is a 3D game with a mixture of 2D and 3D cutscenes. The biggest downside for me was that I had to sit through about 15 minutes of dialogue and cutscenes before I could even get into the game, and at that point I decided that the wait wasn't worth it and I just kind of rage quit. It'll have fans, but for me it's filler to Ilard Boogaloo. Tabletop Playground, as the name suggests, gives you a playground to play a number of different tabletop games from D&D to card games or even board games like chess. The downside is there seems to be no game logic built in. I can see it being really usable in VR, but with a mouse it gets a little bit more convoluted to use, and the question would be, why would I use this? It feels like there needs to be a scripting engine. So for example, if you load up a chess game, you'd expect the pieces to at least be removed as you're playing the game, or at least to have the logic of the game of chess in there. So for me this is largely a pointless addition to the month. The Frog Detective games kind of look like final year programming projects by a team of 3 or 4 people, and that's more of an observation than a criticism. The humour's funny, the gameplay's decent, and it's a good little adventure for what it is. For the sequel, it appears that the developers added a scripting engine for some funny cutscenes and extra game mechanics like a notepad. This means the follow-up game feels more like a real game and less like a demo. It's funny and it's worth a quick playthrough. I do love point and click adventures. Still There has you playing an operator of a space lighthouse, maintaining the equipment and generally trying not to go mad. The game's somewhat complex, but you have an AI helping you out and everything's really well presented. I did find myself getting bored once I got to the part where I had to make myself a pot of ramen noodles using sink water and a microwave. I'm going to give it another go, but I'm not sure how much I'll actually enjoy the game. Struggling, on the other hand, is really fun. You play a mutant character who's escaped after a drunk scientist vomits on the controls to your habitat. Control-wise, it reminds me a lot of Mount Your Friends, with one arm per stick and triggers to grab. The gameplay is a mixture of physics puzzler and platformer, and it can get really tricky pretty quickly, hence the name Struggling. It's got great design, great music, and great style, so I recommend checking this one out. Lastly, we have Path of Giants. Path of Giants is a decent puzzler and reminds me quite a lot of games like Monument Valley. The controls seem to indicate that it's a mobile phone port, but released on PC, and while I would dip in and out of this game on a phone until I'd completed it, I can't see myself doing that on a PC. It's a good game, but I'd rather have the phone version. So that's it. That's 14 games, a very JRPG heavy month. If you're not into those, then my picks are Children of Morta and Struggling. I think they're both worth the price of entry, but let me know what you think. Does the bundle look good for you, or will you be pausing the subscription if you have one? Please consider liking and subscribing for more content, and if you hate it, then feel free to let me know too. All feedback is taken on board. Thanks for watching.